Welcome. This evening, we invite you to join us on our journey as we remember and relive the moments of Jesus on his path to Golgotha while carrying his cross to crucifixion. Many of you remember that this has been a traditional act of devotion during Holy Week. Our service this evening will consist of Bible readings as we progress through the stations, as well as reflections of persons who were present along the way. These characters may be well known, they may be incidental, they may be apocryphal, as the writer of this service has informed us. We will hear from Jesus as he asks us who we think he is, and as he questions himself and his mission. However, as we know, at the end, he is resolved to face what is to come. As we proceed, please engage yourself with us in these moments and remembrances. Allow your mind and your spirit to embrace the experience. There is nothing to read, nothing to recite, and other than to sit and stand as you are able at the beginning and at the end, there is no required movement on your part. Please sit, stand, or kneel as you are able. Let us pray. Holy One, we are grateful to join together this evening in this solemn act of devotion in our observance of Holy Week. We know that this will be a lonely and sometimes heart-wrenching journey as we proceed from the time after Peter's denial to the burial of your Son by Joseph of Arimathea. Holy Spirit, open our minds and our spirits to hear these words, absorb them, and come to a better understanding of how to answer the question, whom do I think Jesus is? In the name of the one whom you sent, the one who died for us, and the one who has redeemed us. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. Station 1, Jesus is condemned to death. As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. And they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so. Come, we are going on a journey to be with the man of sorrows. Come, we are going to Calvary, to the place of the skull. Come, we are walking the final road to journey's end. Come, let us listen to the voices that remember."
Oh yes, I remember him. My name, it isn't recorded. Wherever the gospel story is told, my deeds will be remembered, he said, but my name is not. I was just standing there in a room full of silenced, angry men, right in front of Jesus, and I wanted to cry and laugh all at the same time. Who was he? I'll tell you this. In my hand, I had a broken bottle, but inside my broken soul was healed. No agenda, no desire, no self-seeking, selfish impulse. I came to my Lord and I gave him all that I had. A jar of perfume, nard from distant India, brought in by the desert camel trains and ships on the salt sea of far oceans. Sweet smelling, the incense filled the house, pouring out all that I had. I knew he was going away. I always knew. That far-off look in his eye, always there in the twinkling of the sunlight, always that mystery to him. He was never like anyone else. All that I had, one moment, a broken flask pouring out, his broken body, all that I had, and his brokenness made me whole again.
Two, Jesus carries his cross. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort. And they clothed him in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him. And they began saluting him, "Hail, the King of the Jews!" They struck his
and bare their teeth. Who am I that the whip cuts, that beam and rope and blood and nail such agony? Who am I that the soldiers kick and strike, that draws the vultures in the dawn sky, the scent of blood to desert dogs? Who am I that I go alone towards this hill with none to stand beside me? Who am I, deserted by those I loved and need in this hour? The hands that held, the faces that laughed, the lips that kissed. Who am I that I crawl defeated on this jagged road? Was it all for nothing that I bear my cross in scorching heat and burning thirst? Who am I, disfigured beyond recognition as skin grazes, blisters bleed, and dust and sweat clog eyes and nose? Who am I that they will remember me when I am gone, with voices that speak of my deeds? Who am I that he asks, "Are you King of the Jews?" If you have said so, then so I am. But you stand and watch and stare, gloating, mocking, jeering, weeping. You, who do you say that I am?
Oh, I remember him. Who am I? You don't know my name. That's good. That's very good. I prefer it that way. I was the person with the water jug. Easier for both of us, I think. Sometimes it's best just to keep quiet. I hardly appear in the story, and I can disappear when it's necessary, like in the crowds at Passover when I was arranging things for him. I knew them all, of course, Peter, James, John, all the rest of them. I'd seen them about. I make it my business to know. Information is very useful to some of my clients. Information is power. I'm a go-between, what you might call a fixer. I can arrange things, make things easier for people, get them things they need, or arrange for things to vanish if needed. He needed a room at Passover. I found him one. He needed to say goodbye. I showed his disciples where it was. They had a code, too. They asked the landlord, "The teacher says, where is the room where my disciples and I will eat the Passover meal?" That way, he'd know they were genuine. You see, it seems to me he left nothing to chance. The same thing had happened earlier when he took the donkey. I understood. I thought that when I met him, here's a man I can do business with, a man who knows the ways of the world. Most of the time, I can spot a con artist, and I could tell he wasn't one. And I only met him that one time. That's my regret. I wish I'd had more time. We always wish for things when it's too late. The next time I saw him, I was crushed in a crowd of screaming voices and raised fists. And there he was. But this time he was being dragged by Roman soldiers. This time he was covered in open wounds. This time he was carrying a wooden crossbeam. I saw him fall. He fell right in front of me. I tried, but I couldn't get there. I couldn't help him. The crowds, the soldiers held me back. Like I say, I'm the go-between. I help people smooth their way, make things happen. But now there was nothing I could do. I was powerless, and it didn't feel good. If only he'd spoken to me earlier, perhaps I could have done something, maybe found him a safe passage, called in some of the favors owing to me, a few words here, the odd bribe there. I could have got him out. Again, they dragged him to his feet and pushed him onto that hated place, onto the darkness. The crowd moved on, but I just stood there staring. It was quiet now. You'd never have known anything had happened, apart from a few dark patches on the ground. A wind blew up from the east, and I could see storm clouds begin to gather. He was gone, and I was left standing beneath a darkening sky, a fixer who couldn't fix.
Station 3, Jesus falls for the first time. He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that is silent before its shearers. While he was speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Seize him." And he came up to Jesus at once and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and he kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you came to do." Then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. For all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me?"
I remember him, and I remember that night. I was the servant of the high priest. We moved in at night. See, the darkness, it gives you the edge, the element of surprise, allows you to strike fear into the heart of your enemy. We came armed, clubs, swords, and a few handmade specialties. We weren't taking chances. His disciples were big guys, fishermen, Galileans, hard men. They could put up a decent fight if they needed to. The insider showed us the way and identified him. The one I kiss, that was our signal. That way we'd know which one to grab in all the chaos and confusion. I tell you, he may have served our purposes, but I wouldn't want a friend like that. A grass is always the lowest form of humanity. Everyone hates a traitor, even if he's working for you. But you see, the thing is, I was close. I saw what happened. That moment when the traitor kissed Jesus, just before we grabbed him, he said, "Friend, do what you came to do." And there was a look in his eye. Something passed between him and the traitor. Something I can't explain. A look of understanding, acceptance. I don't know. Seconds later, I was writhing on the ground, and that big gorilla had sliced my bloody ear off. Jesus stopped the violence, though, told them to put the swords down. "Enough is enough," he said. Then he turned to look at us and asked us why we hadn't come before. Why come now in the darkness when he'd been out in the daylight preaching in the temple? Good reason for that, of course. We didn't want a riot. We didn't want the crowds getting involved, not at Passover, not with all those people there. Place is like a tinderbox as it is. But I don't think that's what he meant. I think he meant we were the darkness, the people of darkness. And even then, as we dragged him away and his friends scattered, I began to worry about what we were doing. I began to feel ashamed, and that mixed with the pain of my severed ear. What had this man actually done? Why were we doing this? But later, when I thought about it, I remembered that look between the traitor and his master, and the weirdest idea came into my head. He can't have planned all this, can he? He can't have known what was going to happen. It was as though he'd willingly gone with us, as if he'd been in charge the whole time. I don't know, but I had the strangest feeling then, and I still have it now. If he hadn't allowed it, our swords and clubs would have been useless against him, however tough we might have thought we were.
Who am I that the hands of cruel men take me? Who am I that they close in with the shadows, fists grasping torches before jeering faces, swords and clubs to cut my flesh, to break my bones? Abba, Father, your will? Your will is done with this bitter cup. Would that it would pass. All around me the beasts begin to circle. This night is their time. Who am I? I am the one they want. Who am I? I am the one he kisses. Who am I? I am the one who was borne away and dragged before the rulers. Who am I? I am the one whom in deceitful words they seek to bait and bind and trap. Who am I as I stand before you, seized, shackled, condemned, and know that I will find no pity and can expect no mercy? Who am I whose last comfort is found in the lips of a traitor?
Station 4, Jesus meets his mother. And Mary gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. Simeon blessed them and said to Mary his mother, "Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign that is opposed, and a sword will pierce through your own soul as well. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home.
Nothing to you all you who pass by, look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow.
I was his landlord twice. It was late that night when I first met them. I ran the inn in Bethlehem in those days. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it seemed like they were different from the thousands of country folk from Nazareth and beyond coming to the census. They looked tired, cold, scared, and both very, very young. And she was pregnant and ready to give birth. I was used to the scammers, the hustlers, and the opportunists, and the confidence tricksters. I'd also dealt with my fair share of drunks, losers, and Roman soldiers who had no intentions on paying. But I knew that this couple were different. They were genuine. He looked up at me imploringly, but I had nothing. Everything was booked up. All of Bethlehem was booked up. Then I had an idea. I had a stable out back. It was tiny, with my old donkey standing in it. Well, he'd have to spend a couple of days in the yard, and I sent the lad scraping it out and washing it. Didn't look too bad after it was finished. I wasn't married in those days, still young, free and single, didn't know much about babies. But old Ruth down the road did. She acted as the midwife and set all the men boiling water and tearing up towels. I think it was just to keep us out of the way. Anyway, they were so grateful, so relieved. And then there he was, born in my stable, with Zeb, my donkey, standing outside. Well, they went away soon after, and I didn't see them anymore. Didn't expect them. As I say, there are thousands like them on the move. It was odd, though. I kind of heard rumors over the years. An important holy man from humble beginnings, teaching in Galilee. Some people told me he'd be born in a stable in Bethlehem. But you always get a lot of stories in my game. I dismissed all of these tales, but strangely, I did meet him again. Only by that time, he was a man. I sold my business in Bethlehem, and then moved back to manage my wife's family place in Jerusalem after her dad died. I hadn't seen him since he was a tiny baby, and I only saw him briefly. The second time, through a curtain as I handed food to the waiters, but my cousin had been following him. He's the bright spark in the family. He knew all the details, and I put two and two together. Who was he? I didn't ask. His disciples had organized everything. I hadn't known he was coming, just knew I had a reservation that I had to keep my mouth shut and go about. No problem here. You learn to keep your mouth shut if you don't want the patrols becoming interested in you. I had a good room, and they were pleased. an important meal on all accounts. So you see, I gave him shelter right at the beginning of his life and at the end.
Station 5. Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus to carry his cross. And they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross.
I remember him. My name, Simon. Mark knew me and my sons, so did Paul. He mentioned my son Rufus and my spouse when he wrote to the Roman Church. I appear when Matthew and Luke get around to writing their accounts, but by the time John gets onto it, I vanished altogether. I was on my way to Jerusalem from Cyrene that day for the Passover. I had heard about Jesus and I knew he'd be there. I was hoping to hear what he had to say. I came from a city of philosophers, and you know how that goes. Everything ethereal and out there. I could see a crucifixion party coming up the hill, and I could hear the crowd jeering. Real hatred in their voices. Just some poor unfortunate dragging his own means of torture behind him. It's a horrible, inhumane way to die. Crucifying those they class as terrorists or insurgents is an act of terror, a means of ruling through fear. Their victim looked as though he couldn't go on. Seemed to me that he'd lost a lot of blood, too. Was probably going into shock. The extremities going white, the body closing down. I wondered how he managed to get this far. Before I knew it, the Roman soldiers had grabbed me. The Roman soldiers didn't want a dead man on their hands, didn't want to give him the luxury before they had a chance to nail him up. So they made me carry the cross. It was heavy, full of splinters, and slippery with his blood. I was scared, really scared. How had I got into this? I was frightened the drunken troops might crucify me by accident. But there was no way out. They kicked me and forced me on. The victim was dragged in chains right beside me, head down, breathing hard, trying to overcome the pain. I didn't know who he was, a revolutionary, an activist, a slave who tried to escape. Who knows? As I say, there were lots of crucifixions, but I could hear him mumbling, and I realized he was praying. He was praying all the time. Know who you're carrying the cross for? The Roman sergeant punched me on the arm as he spoke. No, I said, I've never seen him before. That's Jesus, that is, King of the Jews. He doesn't look much like a king now, does he? I stared at the man next to me. So here he was, the teacher I had come all this way to see. And here I was dragging the crossbeam of the instrument they were about to kill him on. I don't know if it was the heat of the day or a trick of the light, but as I stared at him, as I lugged that bloody cross up the hill, I swear he turned to look at me and say, Simon. He said my name. Right there in the midst of all that violence and hatred and jeering and blood, he said Simon, and no more. but he said it in a way that no one has ever said it before or since. He really knew who I was. But how could he? I didn't know him. I'd never met him before in my life. And when he said my name, the fear subsided. I could do this one last thing for him right at the end of his life. And his eyes, they were so kind, so full of sorrow, like he cared for the people who were doing this to him, like he was praying for them. When we got to Golgotha, they dragged him on and forced me down to the ground. I could see them haul the beam up the hill ready for him. I could see as they began to nail him to that cross. I didn't see him again, but my life changed from that moment. Who was he? He was the one I'd been searching for, the meaning to life that I had longed for. I'd wanted to meet Jesus, and I did, on that blood-soaked afternoon right before the sky turned black. I had met the most important person I will ever meet. Who was he? He was the man who said my name.
Who am I, Simon, that I know your name and call you from the restless wanderings of your soul? Who am I that you carry my cross, stranger who came searching for a way? Who am I who mystifies the philosophers and bewilders the theologians while dying in sordid disgrace on this hillside? Who am I that I defy your logic, you who seek the truth? Who am I that I have called you and speak your name? For I have always known it. Who are you? You are mine.
Station 6. Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, Truly, I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these of my brothers, you did it to me. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, If I touch even his garment, I will be made well. And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease.
My name means true image, but I am a legend, and I am Veronica. I wiped the face of Jesus of blood and sweat as he carried his cross. When I looked at the cloth that I had used, it bore a perfect imprint of his face. Is that possible? I suppose all of us are called to bear the true image. We are all servants, and we are all called to be Christ-like. to carry our own crosses, to become more like him. Some say I am the woman with the issue of blood. My faith saved me that day. He healed me, cared for me, even though I had made him unclean. What could I do, a poor woman, in this case more than a man? They never let a man through the crowds, never let a man wipe his face. That crowd, that hateful, despising crowd. A few days before, they cheered for him, all that dancing, carrying on. How quickly it can turn, how fickle they are. Hard faces, eyes that lust for blood, and arrogant soldiers too, flexing their muscles, showing off to the girls, beating the crowd with sticks. He stumbled, and I saw a chance. In that moment, I was through the lines of hateful faces, through the columns of red-cloaked soldiers, past the swords and clubs, the metal that cut flesh, the wood that crushes bones, past the words that shear and burn. I took off my headscarf, and I held his hand in my arms, wiping the blood as much as I could. I held him close to my breast like a child with her children, cradling him in the midst of all that horror, a moment that seemed like eternity. I could no longer hear their voices. I just saw the man who had cured the sick, given people back their sight, let them walk again, the man who had made me whole. For as long as I could, I held him, and then they pushed me aside, down onto the road, under the feet of the crowd. If it hadn't been for a kind man who held me up, I would have been crushed. I recognized him, a young man. I knew he was one of his band, one that was close to him. For the least, he said, as he led me to safety. He even managed a half smile, though his face was full of sorrow. And then he was gone, up on the hill, following his master to his inevitable end. I sat by the road, holding my handscarf in my hands, and wept. Who was he? He was the one whose imprint and image I bear.
Station 7. Jesus falls for the second time. For I am ready to fall, and my pain is ever before me. Do not forsake me, O Lord. O my God, be not far from me. Make haste to help me, O Lord, my salvation.
Judas the betrayer, Judas the coward, Judas the dagger man. My price, 30 pieces of silver, 30 pieces of silver, and a soul damned for eternity. And how did I die? By hanging? With my intestines gushing out in a field, stoned by other disciples, crushed by a chariot, death and darkness, fear and loss, hiding in shadows, frightened of the daylight. I didn't die, but I was dead to them and dead to him. So quick to condemn me, so quick to blame, they made me their scapegoat. All along I worked for him, I served him. I'd been his treasurer and confidant. I had his ear. I'm good at solving problems, sorting things out, getting things done. He needed me. I thought he needed me on that final day. I thought he knew what he was doing. I thought he had it all planned. Everything else was planned. The donkey, the master has need of it, the man with the water jug, where is the room where I may celebrate the Passover with my disciples? And the final sign, the one I kiss, is the man. They took him, they condemned him to death, and I had led them straight to him. I thought he knew what he was doing. I thought about the kingdom that he was always talking about that would come. I didn't think he'd actually have to go through all this. And there he was, covered in blood, carrying that cross up a hill, and I was the one who had sent him there. I watched as he fell in sheer exhaustion, the weight of the wood upon him, head down, staring at the earth beneath, dust and death, shadows and darkness, and I could do nothing about it. Not long ago, they found a gospel in my name in the sands of Egypt. Did I write it? In there, he says that I will exceed all the disciples, for I will sacrifice the man that clothes him. The man that clothes him? He was a man, a very human man. The man I had believed in, followed, loved, betrayed. A condemned man carrying his cross in blood and sweat and fear, unable to bear the weight of that beam, falling down to the ground. I have seen death. I have been consigned to the world of the dead. This was a very real death. Could you bear his pain? Could you bear mine? Who was he? The man who saved me or condemned me? I don't know. He died on that hillside, and I was to blame.
Station 8. Jesus meets the women of Jerusalem. Early in the morning, Jesus came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?"
Ted's a good man. He's always provided well for me and the kids. Always enough food, rent paid on time, repairs done well. But sometimes I wanted more. I was at the point of hating my life. And then Terry came along. I was sort of bowled over. He was my dad's accountant and a rabbi, a bit older than me, but really handsome. He'd give me advice about my hairdressing business, how to maximize profits, get more customers, that sort of thing. He always brought me flowers, beautiful flowers for a beautiful lady, he'd say, and I'd laugh. But sometimes he'd look me deeply in the eyes, and I knew what he wanted, knew what I wanted too. I could feel the passion. Of course, I tried to pass it off as a joke. I could never really do that, could I? I'd be jeopardizing everything. I could get into really serious trouble. I could be killed. But as I said, like everyone else, I have needs, and he told me his wife didn't love him anymore, wouldn't listen to him, wasn't interested in him. I felt sorry for him. The old cow at the house on the corner tipped them off. Ted was away on a business trip, and she'd been watching through her lace curtains. Rough hands grabbed me. There were loads of them, dressed in black, with blank, pious faces. And it was me they accused, never mind the man. Well, they dragged me along the hard ground, barely let me get a chance to cover myself, right through the marketplace, and flung me down at the feet of that teacher, Jesus. Why did they take me to him? Well, I realized later what they were doing. You see, according to the law, I had committed a capital offense. For what I had done, they could stone me, and you could see that that was what they wanted to do. Pious religious men never had a bad thought in their heads, never an instance of desire or lust. They wanted Jesus to say, "Stone her." He was preaching a religion of love, a God of love. He was saying, "Turn the other cheek." But if he told them to stone me, he'd be discredited. He'd be a hypocrite. That would be the end of his mission. But if he told them to let me go, then they could say he was a dangerous heretic who didn't obey the law of Moses. Again, he'd be discredited and liable to be stoned himself. They thought they had him trapped, but he was far too clever. He knew what they were really up to, what they were thinking. So what did he do? He wrote in the sand. That's right, just wrote in the sand. And he wrote weird things, single words: blasphemy, lust, sloth, covetousness, fornication, desire, lying, theft, gossip, slander, and worse. And then he looked at them with those piercing eyes like x-rays, and the men just sort of melted. And then I suddenly understood. When he wrote those things on the sand, he forced them to look at themselves. I mean, really look inside at their own hearts. And when they did, all of them realized that they should be kneeling in the sand where I was, surrounded by the jeering faces. He looked at them and said, "The man standing here who's never sinned is welcome to throw the first stone." They judged themselves, and they knew there'd be no stoning that day. They were so full of sin that all they could do was walk away very quickly. Whited sepulchres, he called them, all beautiful and clean on the outside, yet full of muck and rotting bones inside. They'd tried to trap him that day, and they'd ended up making complete fools of themselves. Some of them never really recovered, losing their jobs, and even worse, from those they had lorded over. Well, when they'd all gone, he looked at me, but now his eyes were full of kindness. He helped me to my feet and helped me rearrange my tunic. "You've been a silly girl," he said sternly, then added with a twinkle, "But where are all these important religious leaders who were so anxious to stone you? Where have they gone? Is there no one here to condemn you?" "No, Lord," I replied, "there's no one." "Well then," he said, "I don't condemn you either. Go and don't do it again." You ask me who he was. I'll tell you. He was the man who saved not only my life, but my soul as well. He didn't want anything from me, wasn't trying to trick me with smooth words and false promises. He wasn't like the others. Everything he said was reliable. Everything was true. He was the best man I ever met. His love and acceptance gave me a new start, a new pathway. My life changed forever that day.
Station 9. Jesus falls for the third time. And they laid hands on Jesus and seized him, and they all left him and fled. And the young man followed him with nothing but a linen cloth about his body. And they seized him, but he left the linen cloth and ran away naked. But I am a worm and no man, scorned by men and despised by the people. All who see me mock at me. They make mouths at me. They wag their heads. He committed his cause to the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, for he delights in him.
My name is Mark, John Mark. I'm the writer of the first gospel. I also accompanied Paul on some of his missionary journeys. I was there that night Jesus was arrested. That night, as a very young person, I followed them to the Garden of Gethsemane. They tried to send me home, said there was going to be trouble, and that a kid shouldn't be anywhere near it. I saw the fight and how in the end he stopped it all. I saw the traitor kiss him and the guards take him away. And I saw all the disciples bolt for it, frightened for their lives. But I stood watching too long. Suddenly, I realized there were soldiers all around me, and one of them grabbed my shoulder, but I was lucky. I was small and fast, and I was able to run away, afraid for my life. I just kept running till I thought my lungs would burst. I was so scared. That was the worst night of my life, hiding out in alleys and doorways, cold and terrified, listening for the patrols. They'd taken him. Everyone had scampered, and I was alone. I was there the next day. I hid at the back of the crowd. I saw him carrying the cross up the hill. He was covered in blood. I've never seen anyone in so much pain. I couldn't bear it. The indignity of it, the shame. They beat him so badly, humiliated him with that spiked crown and stupid robe. I wanted to run in there and rescue him, fight the soldiers myself, but the woman stopped me. None of his disciples were there. Only some of the women who followed him. One of them tried to help him. She got through, but she was nearly trampled by the crowd. Somehow, I managed to pull her up. He fell 3 times. 3 times under the weight of that appalling cross. And every time his cuts got deeper, the splinters dug further and further into his skin. His bones fractured and his muscles tore. Every time it got harder and harder to get up. And when he fell, the soldiers just whipped him all the more. I couldn't get near Golgotha, too crowded and frightening, but I heard what happened later. I heard from the woman how he died. They told me an important man had buried him and where the tomb was. Later, I went and sat there. I just wanted to be near him. Who was he? He was like a big brother, the best sort of teacher and friend all rolled into one. He never talked down to you. He was always interested in what you had to say. A grown-up who's actually willing to spend time with an annoying kid like me. The verse about the man in the linen cloth, it's my signature. I just wanted to say I've been there. There on that awful night and the day of total abandonment. The day when all hope died.
Station 10. Jesus is stripped of his garments. And they brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his garments among them, casting lots for them to decide what each should take. For dogs encompass me. A company of evildoers encircles me. They have pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots.
I am the high priest's servant. I remember him. I remember the night he was taken, and I remember that big guy he was always with. You couldn't miss him. He was always shoving his weight around, always at the front, keeping the crowds back, looking self-important. He shoved me out of the way once when I tried to get near this man called Jesus. I kicked him in the shin. He said he'd slap me if I wasn't careful. I said I'd like to see him try. Get Peter, his name was. I found that out later. I saw them drag Jesus in, all the priests and the guards, and a mass of others. There were loads of shouting, people hitting each other, spitting and swearing. They took him up to the high priest's house for the trial. I knew that was not going to go well for him. When I turned around, I could see people sitting by the fire, and I was sure I recognized one of them. So I went over to see, and sure enough, there he was, the same jerk that had shoved me off the road a few days earlier. "Ha, I know you," I said. "You're one of his men." "What are you doing here?" he glared at me. He stood up sharp at that. The guards were looking at him by then, weighing him up. He looked scared, not so tough now. "Are you having a laugh?" he said. "What are you on about? I've never met him." "Oh, yeah," I said. "Well, how come I saw you with him near the temple 2 days ago? You shoved me out of the way. I know who you are." He tried to get away, and then someone else said, "Yeah, I've seen you too. And anyway, you must know him. You're a Galilean." They all started laughing then. Everyone knows all the Galileans know each other. But he looked angry and scared. "I'm telling you the truth, so help me God," he said. "I've never met this man. I don't know who you're talking about." But it was weird. After they'd all accused him and laughed at him, just after he'd said he didn't know Jesus, he started to cry. Great big guy like that, crying like a baby in front of everyone. He took off then into the night. A few people tried to stop him, but he was too strong, and he pushed them aside and ran off. I'd never seen a man cry like that before.
Station 11. Jesus is nailed to the cross. It was the 3rd hour when they crucified him, and the inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified 2 robbers, one on his right and one on his left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "Aha! You who would destroy the temple and build it back again in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." So also the chief priests and the scribe mocked him to one another, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also reviled him.
You really want to know who I am? Want to know my name? Want to hear if I remember your Jesus? Well, I'll tell you, I'm the one who should have got what he got. Yes, that's right, I'm Barabbas, but what's that to you? Want to hear that I was a good man? That I made up for what they did to him, that I spent my life in good works trying to repent for all that happened? Well, I haven't, and I wasn't a good man. I was a thief, and I murdered Roman soldiers. At least I was prepared to do something not like your Jesus of Nazareth and his path of peace and passive resistance. Peace, what peace? There will never be peace. I expect you want me to say that it should have been me up there, that I should have been crucified and not him, that I had done wrong and deserved what was coming to me while he had done nothing. Is that it? Is that really what you want to hear? Well, you can stuff it. I don't care about him or anyone else for that matter. They let me go and he died in my place. Well, Who among you wouldn't say yes to that? Ask yourselves, really ask yourselves. Machine gun, gas chamber, lethal injection, hanging, burning, stoning, all the horrible ways that humans legally kill each other. Would you go to your death that way? Or would you take pardon and let someone else go for you? You didn't have to think too hard, did you? And crucifixion, could you face that? Would you willingly be nailed up high in the burning sun for hours, days, gasping, fighting for breath as your lungs begin to swamp with fluid, and you fight for breath? Ironic, isn't it? The will to live is so strong, you even fight when it is so obviously hopeless. Covered in your own filth, screaming in your own blood, most of them are driven mad by thirst and pain. Would you do it? Or would you let someone else do it? I don't see many hands going up. I don't see many volunteers. If anyone would follow me, let him take up his cross. Pick up a cross? Really? Do you know how heavy a crossbeam is? Could you carry a crossbeam strapped to your lacerated back through streets of hating crowds? Could you endure the spitting, kicks, punches, whip when you don't move fast enough? Could you be nailed screaming onto this piece of wood and then be hauled upright to face the torturer and accuser? Don't wear it as an ornament around your neck. Don't wear it as a fashion item. Don't wear it unless you mean it, unless you're willing to pick it up. You can carry your leather-bound Bible. You can polish your beautiful silver communion cups. You can stick your fish sticker on the back of your car. But a cross, would you pick that up? I couldn't, and I didn't. It was him. Who was he? I don't know, but he had guts. He took it. He took it for me all the way to Golgotha.
Then he said to them all, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will save it. What does it profit them if they gain the whole world but lose or forfeit themselves?"
Who am I that injustice condemns while the guilty take my freedom? Who am I, lost, missing, disappeared, silent victim of the state of emergency and martial law? Who am I, prisoner of conscience, held in darkness, bound and shackled, abused, beaten, tortured? Who am I, oppressed by wealth, power, and corruption, lies, propaganda, control of information? Who am I, lone voice yearning for liberation, standing still as the tanks approach, as the truncheon smashes, as cartilage breaks, as limbs are shattered? Who am I, tears, blood, vomit, as gas streams in my eyes, water cannon, rubber bullet, live round? Who am I, example, undesirable citizen of an occupied land? Who am I, king of the Jews above my head, king at the crossroads, king on the rubbish dump, king in the marketplace, king dying on a cross?
Station 12, Jesus dies on the cross. And when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of the bystanders hearing it said, behold, he's calling out to Elijah. And someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink, saying, wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down.
I am a Roman centurion. I'm from North Africa originally. Both my father and grandfather were officers, and I've been an officer in the Army for 15 years. I'm part of an auxiliary detachment. We answer directly to Herod. Our job is to police Palestine. Passover is the hardest time of the year. The Jews are passionate about their religion. I've always tried to respect the religion of the Jews. When I was stationed in Capernaum, I helped to build the synagogue. There's a lot of sense in what the Jews say, a lot of sense in their religion. I've always tried to treat them fairly, always tried to instill that in my soldiers. It's not easy. Soldiers get fired up. People don't see the human being in the uniform when they're shouting and throwing stones. They don't know there are some of us trying to act justly, trying to treat people with decency, trying to keep the peace. You can't rule simply by force. There has to be consensus. There has to be some give and take.
And I'm the Roman sergeant. I grew up in an orphanage, got out as quick as I could and joined the Army. The Army's been a family to me. No one disrespects your family. If they do, they'll know about it. These people are trouble. There's no reasoning with them. That's why you have to come down hard on them, any of them that step out of line. This place is hell. You make an example of some to warn the others.
Roman justice is brutal. Holding on to an entire empire demands things of those in charge, and you know that if you didn't act, there would be revolution. It was the same that day that I got back from leave. I was detailed to lead a crucifixion party, eve of the Sabbath, Passover. Convicted terrorist, clearly a political example. It was not a thing I like to do. In fact, it's a thing I hate. It's lonely leading a group like that, the loneliness at the top of the leadership. And like a lot of soldiers, I had quite a lot of wine to steady the nerves before we set off for Golgotha.
Crucifixion is not simply a way of killing people. It is reserved for the politicos and thought criminals. A cross looks like a signpost, and it is. See that signpost? Take a hard, good look and think about it. We're in charge. Step out of line, and this is what you'll get. Have no doubt about it. We don't mess about.
Death can come in several ways. If a victim has been flogged and has lost a lot of blood, then he's probably already gone into shock. The body draws the blood from the extremities to the center core to try and survive. Once the core temperature drops, the victim begins to suffer from hyperthermia. But the soldiers know how to avoid this, when to stop the beating. They don't want the criminal to die too soon. The idea of a crucifixion is that death is lingering. A man on the cross will begin to asphyxiate. His chest will literally be crushed unless he pulls himself up on his nailed hands and feet. This, of course, is agony. Hanging naked on a cross in the heat of Palestine causes the skin to burn and thirst to become constant. Most victims are driven mad through dehydration. Sometimes we'll allow friends to bring wine or other painkillers and feed them on a sponge to the victim. But really, this is just prolonging the agony. The boiling heat, the boiling heat of the day gives way to the freezing cold of the night. There is no protection from the elements. The low crosses are even worse. On a low cross, you can be attacked by wild dogs. Humiliation is a factor that you don't think would matter, but it does. The indignity, the failure, the hopelessness, as your former followers turn against you. Insults, stones, mud, and other filth hurled at you. I've seen it. I would say that some victims almost die of a broken heart. Most of them die in screaming madness and the hell of thirst, crying and swearing and cursing. Crucifixion is a deterrent, but it doesn't seem to work. There always seems to be more candidates, always more crucifixion.
It's a clear message. You can stand up and be counted for your cause, but Rome will have the last word. It's a plain word. Take note. Look carefully. We know what we're doing. We're the power. There is no escape. Rome will go on forever.
That day there were 3 of them headed for Golgotha. The poor wretch we were leading, it looked as if they'd spent the night beating him. He'd already been pretty badly whipped, already lost a lot of blood. I didn't think he'd last long once he got him there, if we could get him there at all. In the end, we had to grab someone from the crowd and get him to carry the crossbeam. There was no way this guy was ever going to make it.
The troops had had a bit of fun with this one, given him a bit of a rough time. You've got to expect that. This is soldiers we're talking about, letting off steam, giving the prisoner the grief they'd had to endure every time they had to restrain themselves from the insults and stones that were thrown at them, from the times they tried to police these people, tried to keep peace. The centurion asked me who he was, why there was this reaction to him. The King of the Jews, they call this one, sir, though he didn't look like much of a king then, even though they'd made him a crown of thorns. They say he's a miracle worker and a prophet.
I looked at him then, and through all the blood and sweat and grime, I realized with a jolt that I knew him. 2 years earlier, I'd been stationed in Capernaum, and my servant had been ill. The doctors could do nothing for him. I'd heard about Jesus, the Jewish prophet, and I asked for him. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
Yeah. He'd been willing to come into my house, willing to defile himself in the home of a Gentile, just to heal my servant? But I knew he didn't need to. He could heal wherever he was. Just give the order, I said. He was like me, a soldier under command. I looked again at this poor beaten man. I couldn't believe it was him. What could I do? I had no superior to ask. I was the superior. I couldn't act against Roman law, or my men or the crowd baying for blood all around me. It's like I say, you're not in control. Suddenly you realize that they are. You have to act because they demand it. They are participating in their own oppression, and you have no choice. We took him to Golgotha, and the soldiers automatically went into action, nailing him to the cross, hauling him up to the crossbeam, dividing any possessions among themselves. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't catch his eye. The horror of what I was doing, of what I was directly responsible for, was burning in my brain. I was powerless to do anything powerless to stop it. How had it come to this?
I've seen a lot of crucifixions, more than I'd like to remember. There are no heroes, not much courage against a leather whip, not much courage when a metal spike is driven through your wrist and your body weight put upon it. They end up a blood-soaked, bubbling mess. He was in a bad way. He'd bled. He'd cried. But somehow this was different. There was a dignity about him even after all we'd done to him, all the abuse and violence. He only said a few words, and he refused the painkillers they offered to him. He was crushed and broken. But there was something about him that rose above it all. I have never seen anything like it.
In an unguarded moment, I caught his eye. I expected him to hate me for what I was, for what I'd done, how much he'd done for me, and now I was doing this to him. When I caught his eye, I knew he recognized me, and I still couldn't believe what happened then. The only thing in that face of this broken, wretched man as he looked at me was forgiveness. He was forgiving me for all this, for everything. I've never seen anything like it.
Then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Now when the Roman centurion who stood facing Jesus heard this cry and saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said,
This man was the Son of God.
Truly, this man was the Son of God.
Station 13. Jesus is taken down from the cross. There were also women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James the Younger, and of Joseph and Salome. Those who used to follow him and provided for him when he was in Galilee. And there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death.
Friend of Jesus, but I didn't start out as one. I hated him when I first met him. My name? Martha. He changed my life. I was a bitter woman, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I know I was angry and spoilt. I always thought I knew best. People resented me. They talked about me behind my back, as if they couldn't say it to my face. I was a bully to my sister. I made life hell for her. Most people cowered away from me. I had that power. I could control them. They respected me, but they also hated me. He knew immediately what I was like. He was the one I couldn't control. I tried to use the guilt tactics that were usually so effective. Don't you care that I'm doing all this work? Don't you care that Mary is just sitting here staring at you with wide eyes? But it made no difference to him. Mary has chosen the better part, was all he said. That floored me. Most people didn't answer me back. They wouldn't have dared. I hated how much he was the center of attention. That's where I like to be. But his words melted my soul, and the touch of his hand on my arm was peace, deep peace. This was a healing, a restoring. But it also meant I realized what I was, what I'd been doing. After Zacchaeus met Jesus, he gave most of his money away. He righted wrongs, paid double to people he'd swindled. That was hard, but in many ways my road was much harder. I somehow had to repair the psychological damage I'd done to people. I had to convince people I was different. It wasn't easy. People take a long time to change their opinion of you. It's strongly fixed. But I did change, and when I changed, I found I loved speaking to him. It wasn't like talking to anyone else. He always had a different way of looking at things. He was a good friend to me and my brother and sister. He stayed with us in Bethany whenever he was near Jerusalem. One time we were talking late into the night, and he said to me, "I am the resurrection and the life." He asked me if I believed in him, and I did. I truly did. I remembered that on that terrible day, the day they took his limp, lifeless body down from that brutal cross. I'd given up everything for him. I'd changed beyond my imagining. I'd given him my soul. But through my tears, all I could see was his poor, battered body, lying on the bones of the countless other victims who had suffered in that awful place. We could only stand and watch, me and the other women, grateful that at least Joseph would give him a dignified burial. The resurrection and the life, he had told me, but all I could see was his bruised, bloody corpse. All I could see were his lifeless eyes staring at me. I stood and watched as the sky blackened, as the rain began to fall. Only a couple of soldiers left now, and Joseph's servants lifting the body onto a stretcher. Soon there would be no one left. The world was moving on. People had things to do, appointments to keep, business to attend to. I could only stand and watch. I had changed, but now I had lost everything. Where was this resurrection? Where was this life?
Station 14. Jesus is laid in the tomb. And when evening had come, since it was the day of preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was also himself looking for the kingdom of God, took courage and went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate was surprised to hear that he would have already died, and summoning the centurion, he asked him whether he was already dead. And when he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the corpse to Joseph. And Joseph brought a linen shroud, and taking him down, wrapped him in the linen shroud and laid him in a tomb that had been cut out of a rock. And he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself.
I am Joseph of Arimathea of the Sanhedrin. Arimathea is not a place mentioned outside the Bible. Some say the word could be a corruption of several place names. Anyway, I'll tell you my story, though sometimes I don't come out of it very well. He died at 3 o'clock on that Friday. The next day was Sabbath, the most holy Sabbath, feast of the Passover. I had to act quickly. Under Jewish law, the next day begins at sunset at 6 p.m. After this time, no work is allowed. The Romans don't bury the bodies of criminals or terrorists. Usually they just throw down from the high beams and left to the ground for the vultures and the wild dogs. Golgotha, the place of the skull, outside of the city, away from decent people, the place of torment and despair. The ground littered with the bones of the so-called Roman justice. We're not like them. We have a law for higher source, and we bury our dead. I knew they couldn't afford a tomb. Galilean peasants, do you know how much a tomb is in Jerusalem? How much it costs? But I knew that I'd be taking a risk. By going to Pilate, I would be showing my hand, implying that I was in sympathy with the teacher. I I had to play it carefully. Insist that the demands of the law meant his body couldn't hang on the cross on the Sabbath. It also meant that I'd be making myself ritually unclean on 2 counts, by going into a house of a Gentile and by touching a dead body. Did it matter? Yes. It meant that on our most holy day, I wasn't able to eat the Passover. They say I'm not the only source of what happened at the trial of Jesus. None of the other disciples could get close. But you don't know if I spoke up for them or remained silent. If I'm the source for the stories I have not recorded what I did, was this out of modesty or shame? I'm a figure of much legend and supposition. Did I come to Glastonbury in England? Did I bring the Grail? Did I plant the Glastonbury thorn? Was I a tin merchant and the uncle of Mary? Did I take the boy Jesus with me on my ships to England? There's the tradition of the senior male relative of a crucified person is obliged to deal with the body. The church has always believed that Jesus' father was elderly and died early in Jesus' life. Does the fact that I volunteered for the task suggest that I may have been related to Jesus? We know that a request for the body from someone who is not a relative could be refused by the Romans. From King Arthur to Dan Brown, they're speculated about me, but I remain an enigma. None of you are even sure about where I was from. But I'll tell you this. By the time I committed myself to following Jesus, I thought it was too late. You can't hide from him. He is too honest, always sees what you really mean, what you're really thinking. I saw his face at the trial that day, bloody and beaten. He looked straight at me, and there was such a sadness in his eyes. Joseph, they seemed to be saying, won't you speak for me? Are you really so frightened? I had a high status. I was an important man. I had a place on the council, and people looked up at me. But when I saw him there hanging on the cross, humiliated and beaten, I realized everything I had was meaningless. The fine clothes, the expensive wines, the best seat in a synagogue, a private tomb, none of it meant anything. It was a moment of clarity. I had no choice. So I risked everything and gave up what I had. I was a coward, but when I was confronted with the cross, even though I was terrified, I gave up the cowardice and took decisive action. I asked the Roman governor for the body of Jesus.
Take us outside, O Lord, outside holiness, out to where soldiers curse and nations clash at the crossroads of the world.
And so I stepped outside. Who was he? He was one who called me just as he calls you, to leave cowardice behind, to make a decision, to be in solidarity with the kingdom of God, to go through his death and resurrection, to commit yourself to the road, his road, the road less traveled, the road of transformation, the road of reconciliation, the road of justice and peace, the road to Golgotha.
Please rise. And Joseph brought a linen shroud, and taking Jesus down, wrapped him in the linen shroud, and laid him in a tomb that had been cut out of the rock. And he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Jesus, saw where he was laid.
We are the ones who stayed and watched while others ran. We are witnesses without legal right, whose words the law deems unreliable testimony. We are the ones who held his limp, twisted corpse and smoothed his blood-tangled hair. We are the ones who saw a good man place him in the rock and roll the stone. We are the ones who sit and tend here in this beautiful garden, so far from any terror, any pain. Sleep now, my child, in the cool folds of fine linen. Sleep, my darling, in the soft comforter swaddling. Hush, sleep. There is nothing to fear. We will watch. Sleep. The day is over. Now is the time to rest. Sleep, my dear one. Goodbye, my love. Sleep, and we will sing you lullabies.
Go in peace and serve the Lord.